Welcome to In the News for May 17th, 2024. We could almost call this Welcome to In the iPad today because we got an iPad to talk about. I'm Brett Birdie from mapsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. I see, Brett, that you're coming to us today from the home office in Omaha, Nebraska. You do so much travel,
office,
Brett.
That's right.
With all the travel you do, have you ever thought that maybe it would be nice if you had a lighter iPad?
I tell you what, I don't have the new one yet, and every time I pick this up now, I think to myself, I bet Jeff Richardson is picking up his brand new iPad Pro 13-inch, and he is just floating on air, and I have to weigh myself down with this thing. How has it been? You've had it for what, 3 days, 4 days almost now, Jeff? The brand new iPad Pro M4 13-inch. How is it going so far?
It's been great. So it went on sale on Wednesday. I got mine on Wednesday delivered by my friend, the UPS person, and I've been using it ever since. So what I have is the iPad Pro 13-inch, so the big model, which is what I've been using ever since the original iPad Pro came out 9 years ago. I love the big one. And then I have the Apple Pencil Pro, and then I have the Folio, what is it called, Smart Folio case. So it's not the one with the keyboard inside of it. That's called the Magic Keyboard case for iPad Pro. This is just the Smart Folio that just sort of folds up over it. And so I think that's all. Yeah, those are the three things that I got. So I've been using them ever since. You know, I have better opinions about some of the items than others, but the happy news is the iPad Pro itself is really, really nice. You know, as I started off my review, it's the first time that you can just truly, because you can get the 13-inch even in the iPad Air model, you can now say that the only reason to get the iPad Pro is if you want something premium, because we're going to talk about the iPad Air in a second. And the iPad Air is fantastic, but everything about the iPad Pro is it's just that it's a little bit nicer, and that's a good. I mean, I don't mean that to belabor it. To put it down. Excuse me. It's that if you don't care about those things, then don't get the iPad Pro. But if you use an iPad extensively and you want to get something that's a little bit nicer, then it's great that you can pay just a few $100s more and get something nicer. I mean, the most notable new thing is the weight, as we were teasing before. It is so thin. I mean, it's people have seen them online and stuff like that. It is just, you know, major, so thin. It amazes me that, you know, when people say it's the thinnest product that Apple has ever made. It's less than an iPad Nano. There is just nothing to it.
That's amazing.
It's so thin that when you look at the USB-C port on the side, I literally do not think they could have made it any thinner, because if they made it any thinner, you wouldn't be able to have the USB-C port on it. So, I mean, unless they're going to break the laws of physics, I think this is as thin as an iPad could ever go.
We're going to go wireless charging at some point, because that's the only other way to
right. Unless you went to wireless charging. And, you know, you think about it, in the European Union, they made that silly law a couple of years ago that said that products have to have USB-C, and they were trying to do it to make it uniform so that everybody didn't have their own standard. But now, as a result, I mean, unless Apple, like you said, had wireless charging, you know, Apple can't even come up with the next version of USB-C 2 that's even thinner to work for it, because, you know, because of the European Union. So I think this is as thin. And to be honest, this is as thin as it probably ever needs to go. I mean, this thing is just so, it is so thin in your hands, it's noticeable. But the thinness is more of just sort of it's almost like a trick. You know, it's thin. Isn't that interesting that it feels thin? Where it really makes a difference is that it is lighter. And I always wonder when something is going to be lighter, you know, is it just lighter on paper, but you don't really notice it. But no, this is the one that as soon as you pick it up, you really notice it. And I know that over, you know, a couple weeks from now, I'll probably get so used to it that I don't think about it anymore. But for now, every single time I pick up my iPad, you have that feeling of, you're like, oh, wow.
Oh, is that,
you know, that is,
you're not going to think about it until some point you have to move your old 12.9-inch iPad Pro. You say it here in your review that it just suddenly feels dramatically heavier when you pick that up.
I just picked it up again. My old one's still sitting here because I haven't sent it back to Apple yet. And I'm picking it up and I'm feeling like, ouch, this is hurting my shoulder.
My goodness.
Which is ridiculous to say it hurts my shoulder, because I've been picking this thing up for years. And yet,
I know.
Now when I pick it up. And so that's the thing, you know, if you use your iPad every single day, would it be nice for it to be lighter every single time you pick it up?
Yes.
Yeah, that is nice. And if I'm sitting here in my chair and I'm leaning back and I'm reading a brief, from annotating something, or just looking at a website or reading an article, when it doesn't weigh as much, you go even longer before it gets to the point where it feels sort of heavy in your
Right.
hand.
Right.
Another thing
Right.
that I've noticed, and I think I heard Jason Snell mention this on a podcast as well. Apple has done a really nice job with, I don't know if it's like the physics of it, the balancing of it, the center of gravity and stuff like that. It
Oh,
feels
yeah.
it
Yeah.
feels good. I mean, the weight is very well distributed, and I know that that doesn't
Okay.
happen automatically, because if I was designing this thing, I'd probably stick all the battery on the left or something like, I wouldn't be smart enough to do this. But Apple has done whatever they've done to sort of distribute things within this super thin space. It feels uniformly nice from all sides, which again, that contributes to, it's not just that it's lighter, but it
Yeah.
feels lighter in a really good way. And weight is only one factor, and I'm not going to tell you it's the most important
It's a
factor in the
big
world,
factor.
but
Right.
it's
Right.
something
It's
that
a
you
big
do
one.
notice.
Right.
Something you do notice. So that's the weight. So I guess the next thing to go on to would probably be the screen.
How
The
about that
screen
screen?
it is incredible. I mean, it's a new technology that's never been used before. Apparently,
Right.
there's been some videos and stuff. I think Quinn Nelson did one talking about that in the industry, OLED screens have been out for a while. People have had OLED
Right.
TVs for a while now, and they're known for having really good brightness, but also very black blacks. So, way
Rich
back when,
blacks. Yeah. Rich
exactly,
darks.
rich
Yeah.
blacks. Years and years ago, you used to have to have a plasma TV, which they don't make anymore, to get those rich
That's
blacks.
right.
And then the
That's
LCD
right.
TVs came out, and the blacks weren't quite as black. It was almost like a dark gray.
Right.
But
Right.
OLED screens can give you that beautiful black, but then can also go to the other extreme and give you really bright and vibrant colors. And so that's why OLED is the material of choice for really nice home television. And so, and of course, it's on the iPhone as well. They have a really nice OLED screen for the iPad Pro, the higher end models. But to have it on the iPad Air is nice. And what Apple has done is, in order to get it super bright, is they've put two OLED screens on top of each other. Which,
Not
what's the
just
name of that?
one, but two.
Yeah,
Tandem
they're
OLEDs is
Tandem
what they're
OLED, thank
calling
you.
it.
But that's not an Apple call. That's not what Apple's calling it. That apparently is something that has existed in the world. Like, people
Oh,
have,
okay. Okay.
for years now, engineers have said you can use a tandem OLED. It's just that nobody's actually used it in a big commercial product before. But Apple was the first one to take that idea and actually produce it. And so what it
Yeah,
means
I
is
can't
that,
remember what they called it. They had some marketing name
well,
now.
yeah,
I'll
they've got
find it.
their
But you
name
go
for the whole
you go
screen. Yeah, you
ahead.
look for it. But it means that you can get just as bright as the iPhone can get, which is 1,000 nits for normal use, and then up to
Right.
1,600 nits for some parts of the screen. But those are all the technical specs. What does it mean just from a regular person? What it means is that things look really beautiful and lifelike. And I can't emphasize this enough. If you have something that is really well shot, like some things that I've taken with my own iPhone 15 Pro that have a nice HDR,
Right.
maybe it was like outside, or maybe it was near the end of the day, when like you have some bright like neon lights, but then also some dark things. They look beautiful, beautiful. They look beautiful on my iPhone too, but my iPhone is so small that it limits how
Right.
much it limits the dramatic effect. But when you have the big
Right.
iPad, especially the 13-inch, it's like, wow, this is beautiful. Or if you go and you see something that has been professionally filmed, like I have a link to one of these. If you just go into YouTube and you type 4K
Yeah.
HDR, you'll see a million of these like nature videos and these demo reels that were made for like television showrooms that just have like random objects. I mean, they're really trying to push the effects of it with incredibly high-end cameras. And when you look at that stuff, like the one I linked to had like, a parrot that was just beautifully, beautifully photographed. And as I look at the parrot on my iPad screen, it is so realistic in the colors that you literally feel like you can put your hand through the screen and start to pet the parrot. It's just, it's, it's,
That's what
it's
you said
really,
in here, and I caught that, and I'm like, okay, I know you, Jeff, and it's like I know you have seen some really nice screens and your television and everything, and
mhm.
the fact that you put that in your review just slapped me across the face because I'm like, okay, it's got to be really good if Jeff is
Yeah.
going on about it that much. You said I feel like I should be able to reach through the screen and touch the feathers of a colorful bird. That's
And that's what
amazing.
makes what makes it different from a TV is for most people for a TV, you're not going to have your face right next to the TV. You're going to be sitting on a
Right, right.
couch, at least, I don't know, 5 feet
A few
back,
feet
8 feet
away.
back.
Right,
Right. So, I
right.
mean, and it still looks beautiful, don't get me wrong. But because the iPad is just right there in your hand,
In your
it, it's
hands,
it,
right?
it's so, again, it's eye candy. Don't get me wrong. This is pure eye candy. When I'm using my iPad to get work done, when I'm looking at a Microsoft Word document, I mean, who cares that the blacks are darker and that the whites are, whatever. It's just a document. I'm just reading it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
highlighting on my annotations have never looked better. Who cares about that stuff? But
They've
for
never
this,
been more yellow.
exactly. Boy, this is a really
The
good yellow
highlights have
here.
never been more yellow.
So, although it is a very nice yellow, but anyway, but no, in all seriousness, none of this matters for the everyday use that I do for the iPad. But for the times that I'm using my
Makes it
iPad,
better
just
though.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just for myself, just looking at pictures, looking at videos. I have some movies that I have downloaded over the years that have HD, Ultra HD, 4K, all that sort of stuff, and they look really nice. Now, again, if I put my new iPad next to my previous iPad, I mean,
Yes.
very easy to see the difference. On the other hand,
Really? Okay. Interesting.
if you're just looking at the old iPad without looking at the new pad, the old iPad looks good too. And this sort of gets to what we're
Right.
going to get to in a
That's
second
it.
about the
It's only when
difference.
you compare
It
them.
it's much nicer, but it's not necessary. So what else? We got the
Apple apparently
screen.
so Apple says a groundbreaking tandem OLED technology. Their name for it, Jeff, is Ultra Retina XDR. I'm trying to
Mhm.
remember what they call the old iPad now. It was something like that, like Retina Plus or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, and all of those
But
things actually mean something. Like the word retina means something for Apple. The word
right,
XDR, I think, has to do with the high dynamic range. Like each of that's not just marketing gobbledygook. I mean,
true.
it is a certain degree,
Yeah,
but those, at least to
a little
Apple,
bit.
they put those words together for a certain reason. So,
How about okay? So we talked about the screen, and almost I'm getting a little bit of a vibe. You keep going back like from the everyday use that you typically would have. That
mhm.
it's gorgeous, but maybe not applicable. What about the M4 processor, Jeff? I
Yeah.
mean, is that kind of in that same area? I mean, it's obviously got to be snappier, speedier. You did a good job of just talking about like when you get into Log Me In, and then you did an update here of something that is very processor intensive. You were syncing a video with text in an app that we like very much called Transcript Pad,
Right.
but it sounds like that you do see a difference when you need that extra processor power. It's there, and you're happy that it's there. But for the vast majority of things you do, it's probably not making much difference. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, I think that that's pretty accurate. The people that have done the speed tests using these things
Right?
like
The
Geekbench and
Geekbench.
stuff like that,
Yeah.
what they have basically found is that if you compare the M4 processor to like an M3 or even an M2, it's about 50% faster. And if you go back to the M1 processor, which you and I both were using in our prior iPads, it's like,
Right. Right.
1.75 faster. And of course, if you go back even further to the older processors, you're going to have more of a speed difference. But for me, I mean, the one that I was using and you were using, I think a lot of people that were previous iPad Pro users probably had something similar to the old M1 processor. And so
Right.
going for that from that M1 processor from 3 years ago to this one today, things are about, I mean, literally a task that you were just describing on Transcript Pad, where I was trying to sync up video to the text. It took like 1 minute
Right.
and
Right.
45 seconds on my old iPad and 1 minute on the new iPad. So it's not quite twice as
That's
fast, but
pretty
it's
good.
it's it's
Yeah.
close enough that you could
Close.
almost finish it to be twice as fast. And so, but the thing
Right.
is, most iPad tasks that I do are not sit there and wait for the iPad. It happens when I
Right.
when I do something
Right.
like that, syncing. It really has to involve video. Now that I think about it, syncing video, if I put together a movie in Final Cut Pro on my iPad and then I go to export it, well, then I'm just going to let it sit there for 5 minutes, whatever, and sync it.
Yeah.
And goodness knows that those times that you need to sit there and let the iPad do its work, especially because the iPad is not the best multitasker in the world, unlike a computer, you do want it to go faster. I mean, if you're just sitting there watching a little progress
Sure.
bar, you're like,
Right.
gosh, I wish I didn't have to sit here for five
Come on.
minutes.
Come on.
I
Come
wish I
on.
could sit here for 3 minutes. Wouldn't that be nicer? And so that is nice. It's just that in, day out use, I don't use my iPad for that. If you're a big video professional with an
Yeah.
iPad, well, maybe
Right.
this is
Yeah, of
every single
course.
day for you. And that transcript pad example is interesting because like I've been there before. Like if you're getting ready for trial and you're getting your trial video things ready,
Oh,
and you've got
yeah.
like a
Yeah.
dozen witnesses to get ready and stuff, being able to shave, make those go about almost twice as fast. that actually could be pretty useful, right?
Yeah,
But
right,
so
right.
there's definitely situations where it makes a big difference. But for day in, day out use, it's just every time, and it's the same thing that whenever you get a brand new iPad or iPhone after updating from a couple of generations, everything just sort of feels a little bit snappier. It's just like you tap something, you're like, oh, okay, we're there already. It's that sort of, simple little niceness. Um, but it's definitely nice. And you mentioned before that Log Me In
Yeah,
app that I use, which I guess is more resource intensive than I had realized. I was
sure.
surprised to
Yeah,
see that. I was like, oh wow, that actually is really nicer. So
that's
this
snappier.
th this is nice. The M4 processor is nice, but to be honest, Brett, this is it's very similar to something that you and every other person has seen in the past when you update to a new iPad or a new iPhone after a couple of
Right.
years. It just seems a little bit snappier, and then after you get used to it, you don't think
More
about it more.
responsive.
What is particularly nice, though, is that Apple, for its processors, it's not just speed, it's also capabilities.
Yeah,
And this is
yeah,
something that Apple can do because Apple designs its own processors. Of course, it's going to make them faster. The M4 at some point will have an M5 and an M6 and an M7, and of course, they will be faster. But Apple designs the processors for specific needs. So, for example, one thing that Apple did many years ago is they knew that for things like biometrics, like Face ID and Touch ID, that they
right,
wanted to have what they called a neuro engine, which is basically just an artificial intelligence
right.
machine. They
Exactly.
said, this is going to be so important and this is so resource intensive that we want to actually design our chip to do this as part of the chip. Or another example is the
Right,
rendering
right.
video. Apple knew that rendering video can be slow. And so years ago, it built into
Sure.
things like the M1 and the M2. When you're rendering video, that specific task will happen super
Yeah,
fast because it's built into the
yeah.
processor. And that's something that on the Intel side, you don't see as much because, Intel will just make the general processor and then the computer
Y-
manufacturers will do
Generic,
what they
right,
can.
exactly.
It's that they'll
Right.
take advantage of overall improvements, but not specific. And so this one, for example, this new iPad has this tandem OLED screen in part because
Mm-hmm.
it's the nicest screen that you could have, but also you literally could not run that unless you had the extra oomph that comes from having a dedicated processor within the
Yeah, that's a
M4
good point.
that runs the tandem. So Apple knew years ago we're going to want to use this new screen technology. We need, you can't do it without something that's really customized for it using today's technology. And so they made that part of
Right.
the M4. So that's a long way of saying that yes, one of the reasons the M4 processor is nice is because it's faster overall. But another reason is it enables specific technologies. And the reason I get into
More
all of this
stuff.
is
Yeah.
it's not because of the OLED, but because I believe slash hope that there are things in this M4 that are going to be better for artificial intelligence. We're not going to know for sure for at least a couple of weeks because Apple's going to have the
Right, right.
WWDC. But everything that Apple has been doing this calendar year points towards they know AI is important. And because we also believe that they're going to do a lot of AI on chip, I personally believe the M4 is going to be even better. And so this is just a little bit of blind faith in my part. But when I was making the decision to get this iPad Pro, I mean, yes, the nicer screen was nice. Yes, the lighter iPad was nice. But because I thought the M4 might really make a difference for AI, that was a factor that actually played a part in my buying
Oh,
rationale. I
interesting.
thought that,
Okay.
the M4, it's the fastest processor that Apple makes for anything, although eventually, this will come to the computers. But I'm
Right,
thinking
right.
that later on this year, we are going to see some AI-enabled features that are just going to be more pleasant to use on the M4 processor. So both because of its overall speed and because of the special sauce that Apple puts in there. So anyway,
It's
that's my take on
almost
the M4 processor. Yeah.
it's almost like there's some AI capabilities locked up in the processor, and it's like we
Hmm.
have to. I feel like we have to go through a boss fight, to at WWDC to unlock the chamber
Yeah.
to see what it's going to do, but we just don't know. And anyway, it's just interesting on the speculation on that. Okay, so. Now I would like to know maybe some on the accessories. Can we move there real quick?
Yeah.
Because I've seen this from a lot. In fact, I think one of the articles that you linked to, I thought just said it really great, is that the iPad is one thing on its own, but really when you're getting an iPad today and you're looking at it from the holistic aspect, it's really the accessories, right, that bring a lot more to it now. you said earlier you got the Apple Pencil Pro, which I'm very excited to hear that. Although I don't know how long you said in your review you hadn't had a whole lot of time to play with it. But then the Apple Folio case that you got there as
Mhm.
well. Let's start with the pencil. Let's go with the pencil because I want to hear if you've been able to use that just a little bit more. I know that
Yeah.
you obviously are not doing a lot of artistic aspects on there, but you're doing a lot of handwriting. I know you use GoodNotes app, for example, and you've been able to test out some of those things. I like one of the things I think you said in here, just when you did the double tap on the pencil that I know you and I have talked about, you now get that little bit of a haptic feedback on that, right?
Hmm.
Which that
Yeah.
alone to me is fantastic because sometimes I double tap and I don't know, did it switch to my eraser or not? And then I start writing and it didn't switch because I didn't tap it just right or something like that. And I'm like, oh man, I got to tap again. I got more to erase. I know it's not that big of a deal, but having that taptic when I read that you mentioned that like that little tiny bit of a of a feedback on there. I'm like, yes, thank you. That's really cool.
Yeah. So the new Apple Pencil Pro, it looks, I've got, if for those of you watching the video right now, I've got both of them held up.
Oh, you
I
got
mean,
them
they
both
they
there.
are identical. I mean, the only if and you have to
I can't
read
even
the
tell
little
them.
the only way you can tell
Don't
which
get
one
those
is
mixed
which,
up, Jeff.
yeah, is that one of them says Pencil, Apple Pencil, and one of them says Apple Pencil Pro. But
That's
otherwise,
it.
I mean, they look exactly the same. I noticed, by the way,
Wow.
just in case, because you could confuse them, I took my Apple Pencil Pro and I tried to put it on the top of my old iPad. And you know how
Yeah.
sometimes a magnet will line up, but if you don't have a magnet the right way, you know how it sort of repels? That's what happens too.
Yeah.
My old iPad, you can't,
Oh,
it's pushing
seriously?
away. It is literally, it's rejecting.
Oh,
It is pushing away the Apple Pencil Pro
interesting.
because of the way the magnets line up differently. So if you're used to using an Apple Pencil, switching to an Apple Pencil Pro, it's a no-brainer because it looks,
Yeah.
I mean, it's the
Yeah.
same. It is the same. But what you get are the extra features. And the most noticeable one is the one that you just mentioned, the haptics. I really like the haptics. It makes so much sense to feel a tiny bit of feedback in the pencil. I mean, if the only change was the haptics, I would say great change. Maybe that wouldn't justify using the word pro
Right.
on it, but it would be nice enough change for a new generation. So that is really nice. The squeeze though is really interesting because as I look at it, it's a hard object, right? I know that as I'm squeezing it, it's not literally pushing in, but because of the haptics, my brain is confused. It's the same thing with AirPods. You know how when you push in on
Yeah.
AirPod Pros,
Okay.
it's
Okay.
like
That's a good.
you know
That's a
that
good analogy.
feeling.
That's
Yeah,
good.
you know that feeling.
Yeah.
It's like, gosh, I know I'm not literally moving the stem of the AirPod Pro, but because of the haptics, my brain is being confused. I feel like I'm actually squeezing it. And it's the same thing here. So the squeeze gesture is a
Interesting.
very natural gesture as you're holding it.
Okay.
And of course,
Good. Good. I was
what it does
wondering
is
about that.
as you're drawing on the screen, if I'll be taking notes and I'm writing something in black ink, and if I want to change to blue ink or something like that, using like an app like GoodNotes or whatever, what I've been
Right.
doing for
Right.
years is you stop writing, you go to the top of the screen, you change your pen, maybe you change your pen ink, and then you come back down. I mean, it doesn't take that long. It's just that's what you do and you don't think about it. But now, as I'm writing, I can, without even moving my pencil, I just squeeze and this little palette opens up, like sort of a half circle. And on that half
Right.
circle, I can switch to a different tool. I can switch to the shape tool. I can switch to the different pen color. I can switch the pen ink and then go right back to writing. And because I'm not having to move quite as far, it just saves a tiny bit of time. I mean, it's not substantial. It saves a second or so, but it's a nice little
Yeah.
thing. I do like it. Now, I will also say, so that's the good news. The
Okay.
bad news is that as
Wow.
I'm
That's
getting
good.
used to it, I will sometimes find as I'm taking notes or writing that I'm squeezing the pencil without realizing it. I mean, I realize it because I feel the haptic feedback,
Oh.
but suddenly I'm
Oh.
writing and
You're
then
just grabbing it. Yeah.
right, and then the little thing comes up and I'm like, oh well, no, I didn't
Toolbar.
mean for you
Yeah.
to come up the toolbar, but it's not a problem because I can just continue writing. It's just that the toolbar shows up for a second, and then as I continue writing, it goes
Gets in your
away.
way. Yeah.
But so I
Okay. Okay.
sometimes
Okay.
find that just as I'm adjusting it or just as I'm holding it, I squeeze it by mistake. Not a big deal, but it just sort of surprises you a little bit. And so that's one cool. Another cool
Interesting.
thing is the Find My in it, which is interesting.
Yes.
So my son told me last night he was looking at the size of the pencil and he's like, "Wow, how did they squeeze an AirTag into a pencil?"
Right.
But that's actually not what they did. It's not a true AirTag because and I want to look deeper into this and I'll get into this when I write my full review.
Sure.
My understanding is that unlike an AirTag, which has that chip with it's got an Apple processor that begins with the letter U, I believe, or something like that. But
Oh, it's like
whatever it is,
ultra
it's
wideband or yeah, yeah,
whatever it
yeah,
is,
yeah.
exactly. That's what I'm talking about. I don't think the pencil has that. I think it is just purely using the strength of the Bluetooth signal. And so
Oh, okay.
it's when you do a search for it, you know how if you're searching for an AirTag using an iPhone, eventually you'll get to the point of where it'll tell you how far away it is, but then they'll actually have an
Right.
arrow that points to it and stuff like that. You don't have the arrow that
Right.
points to if you're searching for a lost
Oh,
pencil. What you would simply get is these concentric circles, and I'm going to show it in my review when I write it, that,
okay.
it's sort of
Good.
like a
Good.
hotter, colder, and it's just sensing you yourself have to move around and sort of figure out where it's getting hotter and, where it's getting colder. But it
Gotcha.
does work. And
Gotcha.
so, I did a test where I left it in my back room and then I was in the front room and it could tell that it was somewhere in the house, but I just had to walk from room to room. And when I finally started to get closer to it, then it gave me an indication of, oh, there it is. I thought it might like beep or something like that to help me find it. It doesn't do that, which would be useful if it was like stuck between couch curtains. So you have to do a lot more
Right. Right.
you're working. But the flip side of it is it's better than nothing, and you literally had nothing before. So, before if I had left my old Apple Pencil in my back room, I would have no way to know whether it was in my
Yeah.
back room or whether it was upstairs or whether it was in my office miles away. I mean, there's no way I would know.
Right.
Whereas
Right.
this, you can know. What I don't think it has though, and I want to double check this, you know how if you lose your well, like an AirTag, for example, if you have an AirTag
Yeah.
and it's somewhere in the middle of nowhere and somebody else happens to walk by it with their iPhone, you know how it gets the
It'll
location
ping.
from that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
without that other person even knowing that their iPhone was being used to help you find
Right.
your AirTag. I don't think I don't think the Apple Pencil Pro works the same
Oh,
way. So
interesting.
I'll
Okay.
have to look into that. So again, it's not as powerful as an AirTag. No, they did not squeeze an AirTag into a pencil, but they did something pretty close. In fact, I think it's actually similar in some ways with what Apple has done with the Apple TV and the remote. Like if you have a new remote, you can try to find it
Yeah.
just
Right.
using the Bluetooth
Right.
signal. I think it's like that. So it's a cool feature. It's something that I'm glad that we have. I'm trying to think, is there anything else with the new Pencil Pro? It's the haptic feedback.
Well,
It's
you're
the
going to cover it in your
squeeze.
review. That's what's
Yeah,
good.
we'll wait for
I'm
it later.
excited
But
because
so
I haven't
far,
seen
it's
a
a
whole lot
nice.
of people talk about that. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to see your review and along with some other people maybe talking through some of those issues
Yeah, I'll tell
on
one
there
last
as
thing I'll
well.
mention is that it has got this barrel roll thing, which so far I haven't really found it
Yeah.
useful for what I do, but it's got other cool features. So, but it's a nice. We've been waiting for a new pencil with new features. Now we have it.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So that is my review of
That's
that.
the Apple Pencil Pro. Okay,
Hmm.
so the other accessory that you got, you did not get the Magic Keyboard because I've always given you a hard time on that because
Hmm.
I think it's great and I'm excited to try that. But
Hmm.
you don't need it on your iPad. You get that Smart Folio cover, I guess. I was going to say keyboard, but it's not a
Hmm.
keyboard. It's only the cover on there, and it sounds like you like it. I know you've always liked the Smart Folio, but this one you're not as happy with. It sounds like from
Yeah.
your review here,
So here's my deal with the old iPad Pro, with the old Smart Folio, which I have here. It only holds it in
right?
one position. You fold, you need to fold it up. People know how this works. It
Right.
folds
You
up in a
fold it
triangle
around.
and it
Uh-huh.
holds it up, and that's one position, and it's pretty sturdy in that position. Like when it's on my desk, it's going to hold in that one position. And if I go to touch the screen or even write on the screen with my pencil and put some pressure on it, it's fine. It doesn't move over. It stays in that one
Okay.
position. So with the new one, they've tried to be cute with it. What they've done is that you can have the triangle all the way down, and when you have it all the way
Right.
down, the iPad is almost 90 degrees. It's this very awkward angle.
Oh,
It
it's like
doesn't make
extending out.
sense.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense at your desk if you're looking down on it. Maybe if you had it sitting on a shelf somewhere, then it would make sense to
Sure.
have it at that angle.
Right.
So that's one extreme. And then the other extreme is to go all the way up and to have it leaning back a lot more than my old
Okay.
folio could ever lean back. And I have to
Right.
admit, that's actually a nice sort of gesture. It's sort of more lean back. I'm getting used to it. It's a new way to look at the screen, more lean back, and I like it when it's sitting here at my desk. So those two
Right.
extremes work pretty well. In between there, what
All the
Apple
way
has
up or
done
okay.
is they have two rails of magnets. And because it's just long rails, it
Oh
means that you
yeah.
can take it and there's basically infinite positions. I can go anywhere between those two positions and I
Oh.
can set it to any position
And it
and
just
set it down,
slides
which is
up and
nice.
down.
If I
Okay.
was just going to watch a movie or a YouTube video or just look at something, it's perfectly fine. You can use all these different
Sure.
positions, infinitely usable. I like that. But the problem is when it's in these in between positions, it's not quite as strong.
Yeah.
And so if I'm just going to touch it lightly, totally fine.
Oh.
But if I'm going to start to apply more pressure, like write on it with a pencil or something, it's sort of because these in between picture positions don't hold quite as sturdily as when you're on one of the two extremes.
Does it
It
move?
it moves exactly, and so then it'll
Oh,
slide down,
yeah.
and
I
that's
don't like
annoying.
that.
And then
Yeah.
another thing I don't like is when it's in the position that's all the way down, which is a little bit more further down than I was used to, but I can get used to it. It's it almost wants to roll a little bit like this, which is really annoying. I don't want my thing.
Oh,
I don't want like a
yeah.
you and your kids, Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. I don't want my iPad Pro to be a Weeble. I want it to be
Yeah.
sturdy
Yeah.
in position. And when it's in this all the way down mode, as I go to touch it, it wobbles. It has to do with the way that it's at the bottom. So I don't know. Right now, I
Interesting.
prefer the old Folio, even though it only has one position, but it's a rock solid position. This new
Yeah, it
one,
stays there.
I understand on paper how this sounds good. Like in a board meeting, hey, wouldn't it be great if you could have a Folio with more positions? Yeah, but the way that they've executed it, I, I'm
Interesting. You're not so,
I'm going to
you
continue
know,
to use it. Maybe I'll get used to it, but
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know if you saw this. I saw that Marques Browlee posted. It was a TikTok originally, but he's done this
Hmm.
before. He has this little slice of what he calls it magnet paper, and so he puts it over on top of the iPads, and it was really interesting to see. Basically, you can see how many magnets, which is an extraordinary number of magnets
Oh
that
yeah.
are
Oh
in
yeah.
these iPads here. But I don't know if you saw this. He goes and just showing exactly what you're talking about here, and I found this fascinating. That it's a whole rail of magnets, just
There it
like you're
is.
saying.
Yeah.
You see that there? Look at that,
Hmm.
and it like goes up and down on both sides. And when I saw that. I don't have one yet, so I was thinking, huh? I mean, I just like you said in the boardroom, that may sound like on the drawing board, that may sound really cute and inventive, and I see what they were doing there. Maybe it's more just for like viewing angles, like you said, if you're watching a movie or something, it's good that you can go up and down a little bit like that. But I mean, for folks that don't want it to move, they just want it to stay in one place, just like what
Hmm.
you're talking about, Jeff. Yeah, not good. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'll include this link to Marquez, just a short little video. But he uses this magnet paper, by the way, on the old iPad Pro 12.9 inch, and then he shows how many magnets are on the brand new one. And there's not a huge difference in those. It's not that I'm saying that anything is crazy about it, but I just don't. We don't think about it. I love the magnets in mine, just like I know yours. Like when I pop it into my Magic Keyboard, it's like pow! It like stops right there, and they are very sturdy. But this is interesting when you've got that little sliding aspect on there. Yeah. So like you said, maybe use it a little bit more. We'll see if you can get used to it. I don't think you're going to be honest with you, but I guess we'll see what could ultimately do. So just real quick, you had some other links that we can cover real quick. I love this review from ArsTechnica, where I thought this was a perfect encapsulation of some of the things you even already said, Jeff. Uh, the M4 iPad Pro review. Well, now you're just showing off, and I think it's a Samuel Axon. His main point is just some of the things you said. The screen, amazing. M4 processor, amazing. Are we going to use all of that? Maybe not. But it's there. It's like you just got to show it off on like what you could actually do. But
Hmm.
I for one, I like it that Apple continues to kind of push that forward. And there are some people that will absolutely, ping this as far as it can go. But most normal kind of folks like us that are typical users, like I said, I think you did a good job of kind of navigating that, Jeff. And like, it's great. It's good that you have it. And but it's probably a lot more than what a lot of people need. Um, which might be, by the way, why the iPad Airs. Before we get to the iPad Air, real quick, I just want to say a couple of other things that you linked to, which I thought was great. Harry McCracken did a fantastic job, I thought, of interviewing. It was at least John Turnus, and who was the other
Greg
gentleman
Joswiak.
here? Oh, Jaws. Okay, Jaws, of course. I thought this was great, and really just the thing we've said this phrase before. They view it. I'm glad to see they confirm that they view the iPad. Apple views the iPad as this magical sheet of glass. Because I would like to one day have a flexible sheet of glass, but okay, we'll get there one day. We're getting there, right? We're thinner. Maybe we can get rid of that USB-C cord. We'll see. Anyway, I just thought this was really some good insight on there. Any of your takeaways here from this Harry McCracken interview?
Yeah, I mean, it just sort of confirms what Apple views this as being. They also talk about,
Yeah.
what the iPad is for and the difference between the iPad and the computers and stuff. But this it is clear, some of this is marketing, but at the same time, I think some of this is legitimate, and the iPad, this brand new iPad Pro M4 is the perfect embodiment of what Apple is hoping for the iPad. And it doesn't mean in the
Mm,
future they're going to of course find ways to make it even better. But every once in a while you get to the point where it's just a really good version of a product. It's the MacBook
yeah.
Air we all remember. It's the MacBook. It's the PowerBook that we all remember. I do think that for the
Yes.
future, this is going to be an iPad Pro that we all remember because it really does achieve all of those goals that Apple wants for the
Wow.
iPad. And you can still criticize it for not having better software and stuff, but it is just a great premium iPad.
Apparently, John Turnus and Jaws were doing a round of interviews. I thought this was a neat little video from Mr. Who's the Beast, talking about something that I was interested. So there's two more things I want to ask you about, and this video covers this a little bit, which I found fascinating. When we started talking about how thin this was going to be, Jeff, one of my first concerns immediately was, oh my goodness, I don't want, I'm going to be afraid to set anything on top of it. If I put it in a case or something like that, or put it in my briefcase. What if I drop my briefcase? Is this going to bend? It's so thin. Wow. They thought about this, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
thought this was going to be another bend gate from what was that? Yeah, the iPhone 6 or whatever it was that really went down. But John Turnus here was talking about how, to your point that you made a little bit earlier, they balance this. Apparently, there's batteries on both sides, and then there is, what did he call it? A central rib that runs up the back of this, or the middle of this device, that really provides some of that sturdiness. How say you, my friend? Like, what have you
Yeah.
felt like when you've been using some of this? Do you feel nervous about it at all?
Not at all. I mean, holding it in my hand,
Okay,
I
okay.
can try to bend it from the ends, and it is not moving at all. It is rock solid.
Really?
I
Okay.
had the same
Okay,
thought. I
good.
was thinking something that's going to be this thin and yet is so big,
Yeah.
by definition, it's going to want to bend a little bit. But no, I find it to be just as strong as any prior iPad, and I think it's because of that rib that you talked about. Which I get the sense that
Yeah.
maybe Apple originally put it in there for heat dissipation, and I'm sure it does that as well. But maybe as a
I'm
side effect,
sure.
or maybe
Right.
maybe this was by design from the beginning, it gives it a real sturdiness. And so it's I'm glad that this is not in it, like you said, the Ben Gate or something, one of those silly little, things that are in the news. I'm glad that
Right.
it's
Right.
perfectly fine. That was something I was a little concerned about, but now that I have it in my hands, it's not a problem. So
Apparently, also John Turnus and Greg Joswiak are. I didn't know there was an Apple uniform. I think they're wearing the exact same shoes here, the
that's funny.
exact same pants, Mister. That's funny. Okay, so if you did want to see how far you had to go to bend the iPad, the brand new iPad, Jeff has very nicely provided some links for you to go and watch the YouTube video, because we knew this was going to happen. There are some folks on YouTube that bought some iPad Pros just to make sure that they could see how far it would bend. So if you really want to see some of that catastrophe, you're welcome to. I'll put the link in the show notes so you can go and look at that. Okay, last thing quickly I want to ask you on this. I had no idea that if you ordered a space black iPad, you would also get apparently a space black USB-C cable. How is that, Jeff? I am so excited about this, and it's so silly.
It is a silly thing. But I tell you what, it was nice. And it was a surprise when I open up the box and I see, oh, look at this. I've never seen
Yeah.
a Apple. So it's a braided cable, which is the thing that Apple is doing with its
Oh,
cables
yeah.
nowadays,
I love
which
those.
makes it, it
Yes.
adds sturdiness. It also it just feels more
Sure.
professional. But then it's black. You're so used to the Apple cables being white, but I mean I haven't even taken this one out of its little casing yet.
I see
But
that.
so
Okay.
it's like a nice little 1 meter cable. So I'm putting it in my bag with my USB-C cables. But I like it because I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, it's fun that it matches the space black iPad that I got. But also it's nice because as I'm looking through my bag, if I look at my cables, I have like
You know
one cable that
immediately.
has yeah, one cable
Yeah.
has USB-C on one side and Lightning on the other side, and it's white. And then I have another one that has USB-C on both sides, and it's white. And I look at the two of them, and I can't tell which one is which because it looks exactly the same. So now, whenever I look at this one in my bag, I'm gonna okay. Now this, I know exactly which cable this is. So it's a nice little feature. It's a nice little extra. But I'm glad that Apple
I
threw that in
don't,
there. That's cool.
I wonder, has Apple ever sold non-white cables? Maybe they have at some point, but I
They
know,
had they
I
have
think,
color
okay.
they had color matched cables for the iMacs. right? I'm pretty sure that the
Oh,
iMacs have color match
yes.
cap, and so
You're
you can get
right. I do
yellow
remember
and
that.
orange
Okay.
and green, but it's not something that they do very often, which is why whenever it happens,
No, this is
it
so
does check out.
unique.
Now the power, the thing that plugs into your wall outlet
Yeah, I was
is still white, so that does not match.
Come on, Apple.
And you can see that on
Wait,
the
do they
screen right
include one
here.
of those?
They
Is,
do,
is one of
yeah.
those
So I have,
included in the box now? Okay.
they do,
Wait,
yeah,
it's in the box. So they sent you a black cable, but a white wall brick.
exactly,
Oh, come
exactly,
on.
yeah.
That's ridiculous. I can see the picture here from Brian Christoffel on 9 to 5 Mac that you linked
Mm.
to. That's ridiculous. That just looks janky to me. Come on, Apple. If you had time to make a space black USB-C cable, you could have upgraded the brick on there as well. Come on.
There you go.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Jeff, for indulging me and all of us in talking about the new iPad. That's yeah, I know I'm going to have to get one because I've seen so many other people talking about a lot of the same kind of things. Like it's just a really fantastic upgrade. But for those of you that do not want to upgrade to an iPad Pro, let's not leave out the iPad Air because that also got some amazing upgrades. And you linked to a couple of really nice articles today, Jeff, and one of them, who is this? This is Engadget, right? He says even the iPad Air is the iPad to get. Like for the vast majority of people that either don't are never going to need tandem OLEDs or an import processor, and maybe frankly they don't need to spend the amount of money you're going to have to spend that extra few $100s to get the iPad Pro. The iPad Air in both sizes now is really, I think he says it's the best sweet spot, and I think I'm agreeing with him. I got to go the Pro, but I think for the vast majority of people that you and I know, Jeff, the iPad Air, it's really amazing that they've upgraded this now to an M2 processor too.
Yeah. So the iPad Air is a little bit more powerful than the iPad that you and I had been using before because we were using M1s.
That's crazy.
And it's
Yeah,
so it's already better than what we had before. And it's got a lot of the features that originally came with the Pro, like the form factor. It's got the exact same screen that we had been using before. So it is, as these Pro features trickle down to the mid-range iPad Air, what you end up with is a really powerful device. And when I think of,
Yeah.
I mean, when I think most of the attorneys in my office, or I think of my wife, who's somebody who uses technology to get things done, but doesn't really care about all the nonsense of it. It's like, do you want that slightly better screen so that the pictures just look that much more vivid? I can see a lot of people saying, whatever. I mean, I'm just going to look at pictures quickly. It's not a big deal. Do you need, to wait 1 minute versus 140, like whatever. They're not doing those types of tasks. Are you going to notice the slight snappiness? No. Are you going to, the thinness, the difference in size? Well, you're going to get used to what you have, whatever you have. And so I really do think that for most people, they're not going to really care about these extra features. They just want an iPad that's powerful enough to do what they need to do, and then they can move on. And for them, I say save. Why not save the couple $100?
Sure.
Heck, with that savings, it completely would pay for like an external keyboard, which a lot of people really like, or it would help. It would more than pay for the Apple Pencil. By the way, the Apple Pencil Pro does work with the iPad Air, so it's not.
Oh, they've confirmed that. That's great. Okay.
So even if you want the latest pencil, that's still. So I really do think I'm sitting here so excited about the Pro because I love these premium features. But at the same time, when my workday is over and I go to drive home today, I am not driving a Mercedes. I am not driving a Lexus. I drive just a simple Honda because I'm not a driver. I don't care less about driving. I just want to go home. I do not need something fancy. And so whereas other people say, gosh, I want to put my money into getting a nice car because I enjoy having that premium experience. For people like me, whatever. I'm just driving from A to B. I don't care about that stuff. If it has CarPlay, that's all I need, And so for so many people, the iPad Air is all that you need. And so don't just because I'm sitting here gushing over the iPad Pro, that's because I'm a really intense iPad user and I use it so much and I appreciate those details because I'm such a tech head. But for most people, and again, it's wonderful. I mean, this is a good thing. The fact that the iPad Air is in its current generation 2024 with this M2 processor has so many fantastic features. I mean, this is why the entire iPad lineup is as good as it has ever been. It is fantastic. We have the really cheap iPad if you want something for your kids or something for, a grandparent that just uses for basic YouTube videos and doing email. That's totally fine. And if you want something with a little more power that supports the Apple Pencil Pro and has the nicer, bezels and everything else, the iPad Air is fantastic. fantastic. It's only if you
Yeah,
really want to pay
yeah.
more because you appreciate the premium features. That's where you want to put your money. You don't mind getting the front row seats for twice as much money as getting the mid row seats, at a concert. That's what the iPad Pro is for. So, so
But
it's a great iPad.
just like your wife, my wife's the same way, Jeff. She just needs something that's going to get the work done, and the iPad Air, which is now the old generation, has been working out great for her.
Hmm.
One of the things that Nathan here in the Engadget review says, the iPad Air does not have Face ID. And some people might think of that, oh my goodness, like I gotta have Face ID. I don't think that you do. You
Hmm.
have the Touch ID, which you pointed out last time, does require, it's the, depending on the orientation that you're holding the iPad, it's the on off button, right? So if you're holding
Hmm.
it in sort of portrait mode, usually it's the right hand that you have to put up there. But my wife always uses it in a Magic Keyboard. And so she uses her left finger to touch the on off. So the only thing there is like, when she has it in portrait mode, which is not very often, she has to like reach all the way, over on top because anyway, it's just getting used to that. But the Touch ID works fantastic. Like, I don't want to gloss over that. I mean, they put Touch ID in this little tiny sliver of a button there, and it
Hmm.
works. It works dramatically well for what she's doing all the time on some of that, as
Hmm.
opposed, I like the Face ID. I've just gotten used to that all the time, but she does the Touch ID on there.
In fact,
But
just
that's
to
the
play
only,
up on that for
like,
1 second,
yeah.
Brett,
Go
the
ahead.
the face, I mean, when I use my iPad, I am very frequently using things like 1Password that I unlock using Face
Right.
ID,
Same.
and
Same.
it's really nice to just be able to look at it and have it happen. To actually have to reach up and take your finger
Yeah.
and put it on the
Yeah.
button. I mean, again, it's not the end of the world, but it does require that extra level of work. That it's a reason why the Pro is premium and the iPad
Right.
Air is doesn't have that feature. On the other hand,
Right.
this iPad Air does have the brand new camera at the very top where it should be when you're in
Yes.
landscape
That's
mode.
right.
So like some of those
Yeah.
features did get carried over, and that's fantastic.
Okay, so by the way, you've noticed that already, that the camera being on the landscape mode on your iPad
Hmm.
Pro, it's worked out better.
Oh,
Like that's
I haven't done a
way.
call yet. I've just done it for tests, but all you have to do is try it once, and that's where it always should have been. I'm so glad they made this change.
Oh, good.
Sometimes I'm away
Okay,
from
good,
home and I need a
good.
particular, my office uses Microsoft Teams, and so when I need to do like a Teams call or something like that, I can just sort of set it up,
It makes a
go,
difference.
and I don't have to sort of, manually try to focus on the edge on the left so that I don't look like I'm being off
Yeah,
camera. Oh,
yeah.
I'm this is such a needed
I'm just gonna
change,
be
and I'm so
glad.
happy.
Sometimes I'm holding the iPad with both hands, or usually I'm holding it in my left hand, right, Jeff? Well, guess what I'm doing? I'm covering up the camera. It has that like arrow that points there, like you're covering the camera,
Mhm.
you're covering the camera. So I'm excited to try that as well. Okay, just a few more things that you covered today, because I know we've been talking about the iPads a lot. Something you didn't get though, the new Magic Keyboard, but you linked to an excellent review here in 9 to 5 Mac from Ryan Christoffel again, which he says it's just an amazing upgrade on there. And he even says, as you were talking, with the lightness of the iPad Pro now, the new one, that apparently they've even made the Magic Keyboard a little lighter, because again, that's where I do feel the heaviness to me with the old iPad Pro, 12.9 inch, and my Magic Keyboard. Yeah, it's probably about the same weight as my MacBook Pro. I mean, it's getting very, very close to that. Probably a little bit different, but I'm just excited that I'm going to be able to tell the difference in some of that. But this was a good article here about the keyboard too.
Yeah, in fact, let's talk real quickly about three things that I did not get. One thing I did not get was this keyboard, but I've thought about it in the
Okay,
past. Believe me, I have
I
really
know
thought
you
about it because
have.
people say it's a wonderful keyboard. You tell me it's a wonderful keyboard, and this new version seems to be nicer than ever because it's got this aluminum finish, so it really does look a lot more
Yeah,
like a MacBook Air. And the trackpad is supposed to be a little bit bigger, and it's got better use of haptics in it. And so, people say that if you're going to do extensive typing with an iPad Pro, this thing's really nice. Now, if you get the iPad 11,
yeah.
the 11-inch version, the keyboard's going to be a little bit smaller, so it's a little bit more
Little
cramped.
squished. Yeah,
But if you get the 13-inch version, then you basically have a laptop for all intents and purposes for writing on the road. And if it wasn't for
yeah.
the fact that I've described many times before that I have other keyboards that I use, and so it's fine. But if there was ever a time that I have seriously thought about it, it's right now. I mean, I'm looking at this keyboard. I'm looking at these great reviews. I don't know if I'm going to cross over because I think the version for the 13 inches,
You're
$350. am I
Well, I'm
going to
going to
get
bring you
350
over,
of
Jeff.
yeah, am I going to get 350 of value? I don't know. I'm thinking about it though. So that's one thing I did not get, but I thought very seriously about. Another thing I did not get is that if you the iPad Pro has 8 gigs of RAM. But if you
Oh
get the
yeah.
1 terabyte version, so that's the 256 and the
Mm-hmm.
512 version. But if you get the really big storage models, the 1 terabyte and the 2 terabyte, instead of getting
Right.
8 gigs of RAM, you get 16 gigs of RAM. And there's does that matter? I haven't yet seen a review that really compares it,
Yeah.
but my sense is
Me
that it
neither.
will probably make a difference for, well, first of all, for the AI stuff that we expect to come out soon, because AI eats up RAM.
Yeah.
Second of all, if you're the sort of person that has a ton of tabs open in Safari, having extra RAM can be good because it
Guilty.
keeps, yeah, it
Yeah.
keeps the tabs open so that when you switch from one tab to another, it's less likely to have to reload the content because it's still got enough memory
Right.
to keep
Right.
it there. And so you know who you are. I thought about it a little bit. It's a couple $100 more to make that jump from 512 to 1 terabyte. And I don't know if I made the right choice or not. We'll see. I think I'm going to be happy with the 512 version, but
It's
that's
the
one that,
FOMO, Jeff. It's the
yeah,
FOMO.
it's
It's like I think I would go to the 512 because that's what I've been using, and I know I'm not using anywhere close to that space on there.
mhm.
But it's like I know there would be a point in time where I'm like something slows down, and I'm like, could that extra RAM have made a difference? It's like
Mhm.
I fear
This is
missing
not the
out on something like that.
It's not the first time, though. Apple in the past has made their highest end iPad Pros with the extra storage have had extra
Right?
RAM and have had a little more
Right.
processor oomph, which is another change too. You get one extra core in the M4, which is just a very, very minor difference. But so there have been prior iPads that have this distinction, and I read all the news on iPads, and I have never seen someone write a review that really does the test and say, there's a real noticeable difference in having that extra RAM and having that extra power. So my assumption is the same is going to be here too, and it's probably not a reason by itself to get 1 terabyte, but it's close. I mean, if you find yourself thinking that 512 might not be enough for you, 1 terabyte might be a
Yeah.
little too much.
Right.
It might be something to cross
Right.
over. So that's another thing I didn't get, but I thought about. And then the last thing that I didn't get that we should just mention is that if you do get the 1 terabyte or higher iPad Pro, you have the option of getting the display that is, what is it, the
The
nano
nano
texture,
texture.
so that
Yeah.
it doesn't have the glosses as well. I've read all the reviews that I could find on it. I found
Right.
one reviewer that really enjoyed it and said it's so nice. And I found a ton of
Really?
reviewers that say that it's actually probably not for most people because it
Right. Right.
reduces it's not that it's blurry, but it just reduces some of the vividness and the sharpness of the colors for everyday use. So like
Right.
unless you really,
Right.
really know that you're using your iPad outside a lot, or something like that, then it's probably not worth
Right.
having. So I'm very
I feel
happy
like
with the decision. Yeah, that
oh yeah,
decision.
yeah. You made the right decision. I feel like I want to say to people that ask me, I'm like, have you ever heard the words nanotexture before a week ago? If no, then you don't need it. Like, don't worry
Yeah.
about it. You're gonna be fine on that. Another story in Six Colors that you linked to was something I guess I wasn't even aware of, is the Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So now I am aware of it, and I'm happy to be aware of it. We've talked so many times about how Apple is so supportive from the accessibility features, certainly for the iPhone more than anything else. But now this is a great little story here on Six Colors that even some accessibility features come into CarPlay and Vision Pro. Love to see this, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, World Accessibility Day was not something I had ever heard of before Apple started, quote unquote, celebrating it. But I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, they started to take their accessibility improvements, and instead of waiting for WWDC, they would announce them a few weeks
Uh-huh.
earlier, which is once again, they've
Right.
done it this year. And I think it's nice because it allows us to appreciate and think
Yeah.
about these changes separate and
Right.
apart from the other changes to the operating system. Of course, this happens to be a busy week with the new iPad coming out, so it happens to be a busy time. But otherwise, they are nice changes. I mean, one of them, for example, is that if people have your pattern of speech is such that maybe something about your speech is just a little special for you because of your needs.
Yeah,
The
they
iPhone
call
may
it
have trouble.
atypical speech is what they say.
Okay,
Atypical
atypical. I'm
speech.
just trying to
Yeah.
use the right word. Atypical
Right.
speech, you might have trouble saying "Hey," SIRI, and then giving it a command, but you could find some other word that's easy for you to say or easier for you to say,
Right.
and then you can have the
Yeah.
iPhone or the
That's
iPad
great.
associate that specific word with some task. So I thought that was a cool little feature to do it. The thing in CarPlay that we were referring to is interesting. If you drive and you are hard of hearing, you might not know that somebody is honking at you or that there's like a fire engine behind you or something like that. And so, but your iPhone can hear that sound. And so Apple has taken technology that they already have in the home. Like right now, if you have a Home Pod or Home Pod Mini and it hears uh, a smoke detector go off, it will
Right.
actually optionally, it can send alerts to your phone and your watch, etc., so that
Oh,
if you're hard of
interesting.
hearing, you will get like a physical or like a
Like a
flash alert,
notification. Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
notification. Or you can also set it up that if it hears like a baby crying, it will do. So those are cool things in the home that Apple did, I
Yes,
think,
I
last
remember
year.
that. Yeah.
And so now they've taken that same idea and brought it to the car so that, if the phone thinks it senses a an ambulance siren or a fire truck, it will display that and flash it on the CarPlay screen when this comes out later this year. So it's a cool little idea that I had never thought about before. And I'm like, yeah, bravo.
Yeah.
It
That's
also had
great.
improvements to the way that it can read signs and the magnifier. There's all these little bitty things. And we say this
Yeah,
every
that's
year, Brett.
great.
These are really cool if you have special accessibility needs and you need them. But you know what?
Right.
Even if you don't
Right.
have special needs, these accessibility improvements
I
often
use them all the
are
time.
useful for
Right.
everybody. And so the one that we
Right.
started off about the command, if you have that one thing that you want to make it super fast and easy for your iPhone or your iPad to do, you might want to use the command that if I just say this one word, do X. That might be perfect for you, even if you don't have any atypical speech patterns. So these are
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
changes for the people that need them, and it's great changes for those of us who might just be able to take advantage of them.
I I just continue to appreciate so much that Apple obviously puts so many resources into this, and we just continue to see amazing improvements on there, on this. And I think that's great. Okay, speaking of flying under the radar, because I think the iPad has really just taken all the headlines. I didn't even know, Jeff, that iOS 17.5 was released this past week. I just upgraded my phone. You linked to Gadget Hacks, which I always think does a good job of like
They do
doing
a
a
great
full
job, yeah.
rundown of all the little features. Now you said there wasn't anything major in here. I haven't even had time to look through, but what are a couple of things here that you found that were interesting in 17.5?
We had learned a while back that Apple and Google had gotten together to come up with a uniform standard that those two companies and others as well could use for trackers, things like the AirTag. Because what you don't
Okay.
want is you don't want, an ex-spouse or, a former boyfriend or girlfriend that's now being abusive. You don't want them to slip an
Right.
AirTag into your car and then track you wherever you
Right.
go.
Right.
And so Apple has this technology that if you are an iPhone user and if someone uses an AirTag and the AirTag has been following you and it's not your AirTag, it will alert you, hey, there's an AirTag following you. But what if they don't
Yeah.
use an
Yeah.
AirTag? What if they use a product from a different company? Well, then you're not going to get the same alert. So what Google and Apple, jointly with Android and iPhone being pretty much the entire market, they've come up with this new cross-platform tracking standard, and a bunch of
Okay.
companies like Chipotle, it's not Chipotle, that's whatever the companies that make these third-party tracking devices, UV and people
Oh,
like that, they've
Tile
signed.
and yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Tile. They've signed on to the standard. And so in the future, if you purchase a tracking device from any company and you try to use it improperly, it will give alerts whether you have an Android user or an iPhone user. So it's Chipotle was the company I was trying to think of.
Yeah,
So
Chipotle. That's close to
you can
Chipotle, but
exactly almost the same thing. If someone sticks a Chipotle sandwich in your car, you'll just smell it after a while, I guess.
yeah,
But
right, right, right.
this is great. Now, of course, it's not a perfect solution because you can still go to an Amazon and you can buy from no-name Chinese companies tracking devices that
Right.
don't work with any of these standards. So if you're truly going to be nefarious, you can get around this. But at least it
Sure.
gives a little bit more protection, and I think that's nice. So that was one of the changes that I thought was interesting. There's all sorts of other little bitty changes in here, changes to the news program, the News Plus
Wasn't
service
yeah,
rather.
several News Plus
So
changes here. That's great.
So let's say you're about to get on a plane and you want to catch up on the news while you're on. Well, of course, nowadays planes have Wi-Fi, but if for some reason your plane wasn't going to have Wi-Fi,
You got to
you can
pay.
actually put it in an offline mode that you can download stories so you
Right.
could read them
Oh,
later.
that's cool. That's
Very
cool.
minor changes like that. But
But I like it.
17.5, when you have that point 0.5 number because it's halfway between, it sounds like it's a big update. This one, however, is not really a huge update.
This
So
one wasn't. And obviously, we're all anticipating that we'll get some notifications about 18. Now, that usually is a little bit later in the fall, right? But
yeah,
in
we'll
a
learn about that
couple
in
of
a few
weeks,
weeks.
we'll get
Hmm.
yeah. So there might be, I would suspect there might be a 17.5.1 or so, or two, maybe before it comes out. But we'll be talking about that as we go. But thanks for those links. In the know. Okay,
In
I'm
the
going to
know.
cheat this week.
Okay.
This week, Jeff. I want to hear. Um, uh, First of all, I would love to hear, like, what is your favorite tip, your favorite takeaway from the iPad? I know you've talked about so many things, but just real quick, what's your favorite thing so far? You've been using it for 2.5 days, maybe a little bit more, maybe 3 days. What's your favorite tip on the new iPad Pro?
I think if I had to pick one thing right now, although I'm tempted to pick the lightness because you feel that every single time you pick it up, I have to admit,
Sure.
and I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, Brett, it is that OLED screen because I know it's just eye
Really?
candy, but
Okay.
when I look at certain pictures and videos that I take, they look so amazing. And I almost feel
Wow.
silly picking this
Wow.
because it has nothing to do with, I'm all about iPad productivity,
Hey,
and this has
it's
nothing to
what,
do with
right?
it. But this is just purely, it looks so beautiful. And and I mentioned in my review that when you're looking at a TV that has OLED, the TV is far apart from you. But because I mean,
Right.
sometimes my iPad is
It's
just
right
it's
there.
it's six
Right
inches from my
there.
face, and to have
Yeah.
it so beautiful and so crisp and colorful and bright,
It
it's
makes a difference.
it's it's
Yeah.
still awe-inspiring. I guess I'll get used to it over time, but because I've sort of gotten used to it on my iPhone. But right now, like whenever I see one of those things on my screen after just a couple of days, I can't help but say, wow, that looks incredible.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so for now
I
at
think it's
least,
great.
that's the
Yeah,
one,
that's it. That's nice, nice. Okay, anything else in the know? Because I cheated and punted this
Sure,
week,
sure.
but anything else?
I'm going to mention here. So here's my tip for the day. Although I said that the new operating system of 17.5 doesn't have that much that's new, here's one
Yeah.
thing that I added to the news app. If you are a person who likes
Oh,
word puzzles,
yeah.
I've always been a fan of word puzzles. I've been doing
Yes, you
crosswords my
have.
entire life, and I love
Wordle.
it that a couple years ago, Wordle became the phenomenon of the day. And as a result, suddenly everybody was talking about word puzzles again, which I love
Right,
because
right,
I'm not the sort of person that plays big shoot 'em up games that you got to be super
right,
fast and
right,
everything
right.
like that. My son loves those things. But for me, something that I can take my time, do a word puzzle, that's really much more my aim. And so obviously the New York Times bought Wordle and they have vastly improved their game section as a result. And Apple wants to try to do the same thing with its News Plus. And so it has a crossword, which is not as good as the New York Times crossword. We talked about that. But I'm
We
sure that
did.
somebody high up at News Plus said, find us the next Wordle. So they've been looking.
Okay,
And
okay.
so here's what they've come up with. They have a new game that came out this week. So if you have News Plus, either because you subscribe to it or it's part of your Apple One bundle, you can
Yeah.
go into News Plus. If you're on the iPad, there's a separate section for puzzles. If you're on the iPhone, you look in the thing called Top News and you scroll down and you'll eventually see it. And the new game is called Quartiles. And so what it is it is a
Quartiles. Okay, okay.
quartiles. It is a grid of 4 across by 5 down, and the grid is composed of parts of words. And so if you think of a word like,
Oh,
like the word quartile, it might have QUA, and then it might have, RT, and then ILES. And so you break
oh.
words into these sections, and the ultimate goal of the game is to take all 20 of these tiles and figure out the four tile words, which are the quartiles. So, for example, I could just take two things like ART and IST. And if I put those together, ART, IST, artist, right? So and I can
Interesting.
tap those two. I can tap art, I can tap ist, and I can tap submit, and it will give me a few points for having the word artist. But that is only two tiles. If I put artistic, if I see at the end of it, that would be three
That's
tiles. I get a little
three.
more point.
Yeah.
But the ultimate quartile for this one is artistically, which is four tiles. And
Artistically. Okay.
as you figure out what the four tile word is, those four
Nice.
tiles go to the bottom of the screen. You can still use them if you want to use them for like shorter words. But the idea is that, you come up with your first set, it goes to the bottom, and then the second set, and it goes to the bottom. And so over time, as you have
Wow.
fewer left, you would hope that it becomes easier to figure out. So, for example, on today's puzzle, what is today? May 17th. I have
17th.
done three of them. And so I don't want to give up two away for people that are still about to do the puzzle. I'll give out one of them. One of them for today. The first one that I
Okay.
got
Okay.
there was an HYP. So I'm like, HYP, hype.
Okay.
Okay, hyper. And so
Yeah.
I instantly said hyper, and sure enough, there was an ER. So I'm like, okay,
Hyper.
hyper. And then I found hyper. What's a word that would normally come after hyper? If I say hyper, you might say what, Brett? What anything
Oh.
up to maybe
Hypertense, hyperdrive. That's
what I
where
was
I would
thinking
go.
was hyperactive. And sure enough,
Hyperactive.
there was an
Okay.
ACT and there were IV. So that was the first one that I got for today was hyperactive.
That's
So I
four
got
tiles.
that
You
one.
got four tiles.
That's so I got
Hyperactive.
that
Okay.
one.
Okay.
And then I
Gotcha.
got two more sets. And so now at the very top of my screen, I have 8 tiles left. And those 8 tiles are going to make two 4 tile words. And it's only eight
Whoa.
tiles. So it should not be that hard, right? Because I should just be able to look at it and say, there's only eight
Well,
of
I
them, and
don't
four will
know.
go together. And I stared and stared at them before we started recording today, and I'm not seeing it. So later on today, I'll come back to
Is
it
it-
and I'll look at it again. But eventually, you
That's
want to get
great.
all of them, and hopefully, you do. So I think it's a cute little game. What I like about it is that you can't die, so to speak. Unlike the New York Times has
Right.
the New York Times has some games like Wordle, for example. You only get a certain number of guesses, right?
Right. And then you're done. Right.
Connections is a fun game, but if you don't get it after getting four mistakes, you lose. This is more like a crossword puzzle, and that I can
Okay.
just work on it
Nice.
throughout the day, and you can get a certain number of points. But your ultimate goal is to
Nice.
find those 5 different quartiles, and if you guess
Okay.
incorrectly, you guess it says no, that's not a word. And so I like the fact that it's a very casual game. It's not going to
Yeah.
punish me for
Yeah.
not being fast enough. No, again, the jury's still out on this one because it's only been out since Wednesday. I've just been playing it a few days. I don't think it's as fun as Wordle, but it's pretty good. And so for Apple trying to come up with their version of a casual daily
Right.
board game, I think they might have a winner on their hands here. So I'm cautiously optimistic about this being a good, fun puzzle game that I'm going to play into the future.
So to be clear, this is only in Apple News Plus. So you have to have a subscription to Apple News Plus. But am I right that it's only after you upgrade to 17.5? I guess because
Right.
they did so many improvements or some upgrades into the Apple News Plus
Exactly. It's
app.
part of the new
And
version
so,
of the app.
okay,
Right.
okay. Okay, so,
So
so you have to have those two things. You have to have a subscription to Apple News Plus, which I do, and I recommend. I think it's great. I have the Apple One subscription, and you have to upgrade to iOS 17.5, which again I just upgraded right before we started on my phone, and everything worked out great. Doesn't take a whole long time, and I'm glad that I saw that and I upgraded. Now I'm going to go try playing Quartiles. And see what I can do. Can I compete with you? Is this one you compete, or is it just on your own? Do you know?
That's an excellent question. I don't know. I don't see that built into it, but that would be a fun idea.
Well, I
There's
do. So some of my family does the crosswords in the Apple News Plus, Jeff, and there's not like a competition thing, but it will tell you how quickly that you solved the puzzle.
Oh, I did not know that.
And
Okay.
so we send that back and forth to each other because I was like, I did it in 53 seconds. I mean, the short one, not the big long one.
Yeah.
I'm not that good. But anyway, so it just, interesting. Sometimes they have that gamification on there for, playing with other people or competing with other people. Great stuff. Jeff, thanks for sharing all of your information about the iPad Pro and answering all of my questions about it. And yeah, I've got to go find one today
There you go.
because now I'm convinced more than anything else. Great, Jeff. Thanks again. We'll talk with you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.